Guys, so we got we almost lost a pup. That's the best way to put it, and it's the worst way to have to say it. But right now we've got a puppy at the ER, and I want to make sure you guys have the tools and just be aware. So we've got two different litters here, right? And I keep talking about the intelligence here and the challenges there. We put the pellets in. I'm gonna tell you, I wouldn't do this if I were you. Don't put pellets into the dogs who are 4 weeks old. These dogs are 3 weeks. I figure they're smart enough, and nobody swallowed a pellet. That's not the issue. One of the dogs began to aspirate last night. About 2:30 is my normal bedtime, and I do a check. Say, how's everybody doing? Touch and rub, test, and everybody was good. I start hearing hacking about 5 to 7 minutes after I cut the TV off and did set myself up to go to sleep. And this puppy is fighting. He's fighting for his life, and I do all my tricks. And unfortunately, it just kept getting worse. So I took him to the ER. He definitely has aspiration pneumonia. They got him on oxygen currently. And if everything goes right, he'll be back with us soon. They said they didn't see any clear signs of basically pneumonia like really setting in, but he began to choke. Remember that in the first 7 to 14 days especially, the puppies don't have an off switch. Now, most of the time I've had no issues. Be it these dogs, see look, they're eating on mom, and they basically paused. They're like, okay, we're done. But there is a puppy or puppies that we call greeters. I'm attaching a video. A part of this video, you'll see Ruben break down the 2 cases in which your dog can get into a state of aspiration pneumonia. So stay tuned and definitely listen for that. And then Chris Moore and I will do a video on how to manage it. What are the things that you can do at your crib? 2 things you want to keep on deck, especially if you have a brachycephalic breed: gentamicin, Albon, and Clavamox, just in case. And then we'll talk about the things that, again, how to do it, some other stuff. But I took him to the emergency room because, again, I did everything that I knew to do, and I just want the stress off of me. I broke into a sweat. I'm sitting here with the aspirator, this tube, trying to keep him. It's a scary situation. So when you have a greeter, make sure that if you see him eat enough, remove him. Take him away from mom. If you got to hold him, put him somewhere else for a short amount of time. The greeters, they keep eating. And what happens is sometimes that it'll overfill, and there's a flap that covers our throat, epiglottis. And what ends up happening is that gets into the lungs. Because the lungs are normally warm, this bacteria builds up, and Ruben's going to break it down in great detail. And the next thing you know, this dog can't find any oxygen. So he's walking around choking, trying to find air, and the breaths get shorter and shorter and shorter. And for you, it gets scarier and scarier and scarier. Now, I was able to keep my cool even with the doctors because, again, he's either going to make it or he's not. But we got him there as quick as we could to ensure he was going to be safe, to be clear. So we'll talk about more processes in another video. Listen to how Ruben breaks down the risk and even how a dog gets into an aspirated pneumonia state of being. And then, guys, thank you for tuning in. I'll hope everything goes right, and we'll keep you tuned in on our, up to date on that. Stay tuned, and as always, people, just keep taking care of your dogs. And we're going to put this part on our YouTube for sure. But I wanted you to break down, if you don't mind, how a pup gets aspiration pneumonia, because the dog we have right now, not only did it go into a heavy level of gasping, but he starts struggling. I had to take him to the emergency room last night. I did everything I knew to do, but he had to go. So they taxed me, right? That bill.
Left up and down, left probably $500 a day. That's probably going on the cheap end.
Yeah, no, it's $2,400 for the 24 hours.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here last night, and at one point, unfortunately, I thought he had swallowed a pellet, but I'm like, nah, he ain't swallowed no pellet. And even Chris said it would dissolve either way it goes. But then he's like hacking and heaving, and he can't breathe. And in that process, he's 3 weeks this Thursday, so he's not even a solid 3 weeks old. And so I go at some point, man, I break into a sweat. I'm like patting him and trying to like calm him down, and he just can't get oxygen. So when I get him there today, and I said, guys, listen, I've done everything I know to do, and I know to do a lot. But I said, could you run an X-ray? Because I want to make sure he didn't swallow none. They said X-ray showed he's fine, but they got him in an oxygen chamber right now, and they're running some small stuff. But if you could, can you break down what goes on and how a dog even gets to an aspiration pneumonia state? Especially because I got four others, and nobody else has the problem, and it just popped out of nowhere.
Yeah. So is he still obviously he's still suckling?
He's not here. He's at the emergency room. But I tell you this, I even stuck my hand down my little pinky down his throat to make sure nothing was in there. I didn't feel anything, but I just was checking to see if he was okay. So he fought for me for some time, and then we got him there, and they was able to calm him down. But I'm like, where does aspiration pneumonia even come from, especially with this bully breed? And why? What were some of the signs I could have looked for?
It's more common than you would assume. First and foremost, the most common way I've seen dogs get aspiration pneumonia is that you got these what they call greeters, and that's the pup that just has so much force and just wants to continue suckling. You got to realize that a puppy doesn't really know when he's full. Most of the time they just, and you'll notice even if a puppy is full, you'll wake him up, even if he's just barely eating, and you put your finger in there, and the first thing he starts to do is suckle. It's like a reflex. It's an autonomic reflex. That's kind of their survival thing to do. Suckle, because they know they got to eat in order to survive. So the most common way I've seen it happen is a dog that's a greeter, which I call, so they'll suckle, knowing that they're full, not knowing that they're full, and continuously suckle. Eventually, there's two things that happen, Some of that milk starts to back up, and it starts to come up their way, and, right at the epiglottis where it bifurcates, it separates the trachea from the esophagus. When you're drinking, the job of and when you're breathing, the job of the epiglottis is to cover what? Your esophagus, because when you breathe, you want the air to go to the lungs. Vice versa. When you're eating, you want it to go the other direction. You want it to block the actual, trachea way, so nothing goes down into the lungs. But when you got a dog that's consistently just going so quick, what the term in itself says aspiration, it aspirates. So meaning whatever fluid, whatever is going down the other way, it's competing with the breath. And if the breath goes first or the suckle comes in second, either way they're competing with breath because he's going at such a fast rate he doesn't even know it. That milk eventually goes down the wrong passageway and it goes into the lungs. Unfortunately, if it doesn't get coughed up or if it doesn't get brought back up, because usually there's a coughing reflex that comes right after it, and a little bit it goes down. But if it stays down there, what happens? The lungs are nice and they're nice and dark and they're nice and warm. And a lot of times, because if when you take a really deep breath of cold air, it'll get warmed up, and it happens through the nasal terminates and the mouth, But once it sits there and it sediments, we get to something that's called Pseudomonas, and basically Pseudomonas is a bacteria, and pseudo meaning false, meaning that it needs very little oxygen in order to survive. But there's a ton of oxygen in the lungs. That's where all the the exchange in the alveoli from SpO2 is happening right then and there. So it sediments, it sits down, it waits, and then eventually all that bacteria starts to become opportunistic. Once it becomes opportunistic, then we've got a lot of issues because now it starts turning into phlegm. Phlegm starts to sediment, starts to stay down, and it starts to basically blog down the alveoli, and now the animal is having a hell of a time breathing, much less. It's choking on itself. It's competing for air. And so that's one common way. The other common way is, are you still there, Trevor?
Yeah, no, I'm. This is all being recorded, man.
When people are starting to feed them with a tube, and this happens more than you would know. A lot of people going into the wrong airway, instead of, and actually technically the esophagus is not an airway, it's a pipe, so going into the wrong pipe, so versus going into the esophagus where, it's going to drop nice into the belly and everything, they end up in the trachea, and the trachea now obviously feeds into, and they'll feed a dog, and sometimes the poor dog, I've seen, this is really sad, I've not seen it, but I've heard of people basically drowning their own pups, not knowing they're in the wrong spot when they're doing the tube feeding. And a lot of people stay hush-hush about it, tell the owner, especially if they're charging. Some people actually induce the aspiration, because they're actually putting a little bit of the actual milk into the wrong passageway. And by the time they figure it out, sometimes they can save them right on the spot. If you're quick enough, you can save them pretty quick. But you've already done the damage. You've already put some milk in there. And, so you can sit there and aspirate all you want and everything. So my personal way, but people, of course, they think their puppy should be eating all the time and eating all the time. The moment, if I know I got a greeter, I don't wait until he starts having that milk coming up its nose. And a lot of people think it's cute. Oh, look how cute it is. Look, the milk's coming out its nose. No, that's not cute. That's not cute. Those turbinates are going to feed right back into the, if the epiglottis doesn't close up, it's going to go right back into the actual trachea. And then boom, what do we have? Aspiration pneumonia, because the milk is going to sit there. It's going to ferment. It's not going to go anywhere. And then boom, there you got, you just built up the aspiration pneumonia. So there's two ways of, getting it. One is, through the actual feeding of the tube and not feeding properly and being in the wrong passageway. And the second way is by having a greeter, a puppy that just consistently eats so much that he doesn't even know he's eating, and that milk starts to come up. You don't even see it sometimes. It could just be resting on the nasal turbinates, but then when it's starting to breathe and the epiglottis closes up, boom, that little tiny drops, they start to fall, fall in there, and next thing you know, you've got a little bit of aspiration pneumonia. And it can be, it can be lethal, if you don't treat it properly, or if you don't treat it at all, it can be lethal. So I mean, obviously the treatment of choice. There's many ways. People start with amoxicillin because it's got a clavonate in there. Personally, if you got a little humidifier, or nebulizer, you might want to put what I like to do is use gentamicin in the nebulizer in it, and then that actual gentamicin actually gets down in a physical form into the actual alveoli and clings on, and it's actually a bacteriostatic, meaning it's not going to let, bacteriostatic, it won't let the bacteria continue to reproduce. So that on top of putting it under some steaming water to break up all the fluids and stuff, and then using a little aspirator to get all of it out. It can be a tedious process, but the survival rate is also pretty high. It's a pretty good rate. If you follow the procedure. And obviously if you don't have a nebulizer or a vaporizer or anything like that, Clavamox clavonate is another great form of treating it, but you still have to do the actual steam baths. You gotta get them in a steamy bath and start to break everything up. And if you can, monitor the puppy when it's eating, and as soon as you see that little belly just get a little bit of gorge, boom, take him off the mama, put him aside. You stimulate him to urinate and defecate, put him aside in a nice little warm spot, let him fall asleep, and he's done for the day. He is done. And you get a lot of greeters, and these are very vicarious, very strong little puppies. Yeah,
he is strong.
Like all they know is how to eat, and mama doesn't know how to supervise that. So those are the two most common ways of getting aspiration pneumonia. Of course, you've got secondary pneumonia, but that's a whole different, in this particular, it aspirated somehow, either, the person tube feeding, which is
no. It was definitely,
or the puppy just being a greeter and just, you have to remove them, because otherwise this is the situation that could happen.
Yeah, well, it was definitely one of, it just felt like he was suffocating, and he couldn't find any oxygen, and then the breaths got shorter and shorter, and so I was like, I took him up there about 3:00 in the morning, to go and just spend some time. But he's been eating. I think that's probably the thing. He's eating too good.
There you go. Eating too good. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
He's eating too good, man, because that joker's thick as a hog, and unfortunately, he doesn't have. It sounds like the self-control, like you said. So it's funny because we're analyzing both Maya's pups in comparison to Zara's, and they're two different type of dogs. I mean, the brilliance, the intelligence, the way that the pups think, even as early as 3 days, we saw a big difference in their ability to think things through. And just even now, it's two pups eating on Zara. She's been in there for the past couple, let's say the past 30, 40 minutes. the ones who ate enough, they ate enough, and if you touch them, they don't feel real compact. So the other challenge I know is once the dog gets into that hypersensitive or that hyperactive breathing stuff, he basically starts filling his body up with a bunch of oxygen too. So that was the other thing that the doctor said is like, yo, he's gasping for so much air, his whole stomach is filled with air now. So we're trying to like relieve it, but because he can't breathe, he keeps going right back. So then they had to like calm him down so they could get him just to like take in the amount of oxygen he needs versus fighting to breathe. So they said that they caught it pretty early because they couldn't see, even the pneumonia per se. They said we couldn't see the pneumonia.
Lord, that's good.
Yeah, they said they couldn't see it. It literally said we're trying to. He said I even brought a second pair of eyes in, and again I told him to do the X-ray just in case. He says we didn't see anything there, so that was good to hear. Which means it's definitely one of those other issues, and it sounds like it's probably the pneumonia problem. It's funny because it's not funny, but my papa he had a welding cancer and he didn't die from the cancer. He died from a heart attack, but he had pneumonia 3 times and he was getting that while he was in the hospital as well. So that pneumonia is a plague.
It's hey man, you'd be surprised of like some people that are way up in age, they'll be 80, 90, almost 100 years old and they're strong as hell, and it only takes us one little fucking pneumonia, dude. One little bit of pneumonia, and it's like it's curtains,
Yeah. It's a movie with Shia LaBeouf and the brothers in them, and they literally he took 18 shots and survived this, survived that, and died getting into a river and catching pneumonia.